Welcome back to Project Command. I'm Captain Peter Younes, and I'll be your host. On today's episode, we're going to talk about how you can use artificial intelligence to solve big problems. But first, if you're enjoying this podcast, it really helps us if you like, follow, or share this episode with a friend. And if you have episode ideas or questions you want us to answer, send us an email at projectcommandpodcast@gmail.com. That's projectcommandpodcast@gmail.com. All right, let's get to the show. All right, guys, welcome back. Thank you for being here. This episode that I'm doing today is a continuation of my AI in the Fire Service series. And so we've done a bunch of episodes where a lot of times we'll focus on a specific position, whether that's ChatGPT for fire chiefs or ChatGPT for fire training officers. And I've tried to share as much information as I possibly can in kind of like specific domains. But what I want to do for this episode is I want to zoom out and I want to just talk about what a strategy that I've developed over the last several years is for dealing with big problems. And I want to keep it kind of broad because, everybody's problems are different, but the structure for solving those problems can follow a consistent pattern. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. And, for me, I really like this concept because the thing about problems is sometimes just staring at that blank sheet of paper is the hardest part, getting started. And sometimes your brain itself is the problem. You have this thing in your head or this problem you're trying to work out, and it feels really intimidating or complex. And AI can be really valuable for solving that. And when I say AI, I've previously talked a lot about ChatGPT, but I want to leave it a little bit more broad, and I'm going to try to weave in some more stuff about some other AI models, whether that's Grok or Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever. But how can you use artificial intelligence or LLMs, large language models, to help you solve big problems? So let's first do a quick overview of this particular strategy, and then we will zoom in on all of the individual parts of it. Okay, so the 7 steps for this framework are: first, get the problem out of your head. Second, organize it and review it. Third, break the problem into pieces. Fourth, define the goals and the timeline. Fifth, turn it into a to-do list. 6, organize that to-do list by sequence and priority. And last, execute and iterate. All right, so let's dig into that a little bit more and describe a little bit more about what that means. So first, getting it out of your head. So a lot of times when we have these big problems in our head, it's difficult to organize it because we're trying to solve everything all at once. Like we have this massive problem, we're trying to define it, we're trying to solve it, we're trying to prioritize it, we're trying to sequence it all at once in our head. And so the trick is you have to get it out of your head and in front of your eyes so that you can review it in a way that's a little bit easier for your brain to digest. So here's how I like to do that using AI. So on pretty much every model that I'm aware of, there is a little microphone icon, which is a dictation icon, or it's a dictation button. So when you hit that and you start talking, the model will start recording. And then when you're done talking and you hit stop, it will transcribe all the things that you've said into words, which you then hit the little arrow button and it pops it into the LLM. So what I like to do, and another trick I found for this is it really helps if you're walking around. I don't know why, but going for a walk, something about like the physical motion of it really helps kind of, I don't know. I actually have no idea what it does, but for whatever reason, I assure you it does help. So what I like to do is I like to put on my AirPods and I will, because they've got the microphone in them, and I will just walk around the block and I will get everything out of my head that I possibly can about the problem. So what the problem is, why it matters, what some of the constraints might be, maybe what you've already tried, what you think might work, what you're worried about, anything you can think of. And it doesn't even have to be in order, just spit it all out. in no particular order, just a total brain dump. Okay. Now, once you're done dictating, you're going to hit the stop button. It's going to transcribe it all for you. And then you hit that little arrow button or enter or whatever, and it drops it into the LLM. Okay. Oh, and one more thing. You want to add at the very end, once you're done brain dumping, you're going to say, organize the information I just gave you into clear bullet points. Okay. So now what we want to do is just go back and read those bullet points. And again, at this point, we're not trying to solve anything. We're just reviewing it for accuracy. And this is an opportunity to kind of see if you missed anything. So a lot of times you'll be reading it through and you'll go, oh, you know what? I forgot I wanted to say this, or I forgot I wanted to add that. So you hit that microphone button and you just say, hey, this bullet point needs to be changed to this. And also I forgot to add this, this, and this. So step 2 is really just about making sure that everything that's in there is accurate and that you didn't miss anything. Okay. Step 3, you're going to break the problem into pieces. Now, a lot of times what I've found is that big problems or problems that seem big are not usually that complicated. They just feel complicated because we're looking at them all at once. So, if we were to kind of look at this from a project management lens, this is why we use what's called a work breakdown structure, which is where you break down work into each individual element. And by doing that, we can see, hey, look, this project isn't actually that intimidating. It's just a lot of different pieces. Each one of them, is totally doable. But when you look at them all in their totality, it's very intimidating. Okay, so now we need to break down these bullet points into pieces. So you might say something like, break this problem into major categories of work. And if you want, you can be more specific than that, of course, but just saying that, a lot of times what you'll now get is those bullet points are going to be broken into things like, you'll get all kinds of categories: research and information, stakeholder coordination, budget and funding, technology and equipment, training and requirements, or implementation, all these different categories of work. And so it'll take all of those pieces of information and it'll say, hey, listen, when you look at this problem from 30,000 feet up, these are the different categories of work that this problem can be broken into. So at this point, and I guess I should say, one of my favorite expressions is that a well-defined problem is half solved. And what we're doing when we first get things out of our head, turn it into bullet points, and then break it into categories is we're trying to define the problem. Like this big problem that we have, why does it seem so intimidating? What does it actually look like when we break it apart? All right. So the next part of this, and this is a really important part, is we need to define our goals and our timeline. And this doesn't need to be anything crazy or complicated. What we need to do is we need to make sure, and maybe you already did this in your brain dump, and if so, then great, you can skip this step. But you really need to make sure that the AI model understands and let me clarify some terms here. By timeline, I mean, when does this need to be done by? Is this a 1-day problem? Is this a 1-month problem? Is this a 5-year problem? Whatever, because that's going to matter when we put together our plan, obviously. So we need to say, this problem needs to be solved by this date, or by, this period of time, or whatever. And then we also need to define our goals, which is, what does solved look like? And by the way, it's possible that we don't know that yet. And okay, maybe we don't, and that's fine. But if you do know what the goal is or what the desired end state looks like, it's really helpful to say that into the model. Like, hey, solving this problem means that this, and this will look like this, and this issue will have been resolved, or whatever the solution is. And so this is just a way to, now that we've defined the problem, we also need to define our end state. Okay, so that's the 4th step in this process. All right, so let's capture progress here. What we've done so far is we have gotten this problem out of our head, and we have fed it into the AI model and had it repeated back in bullet point format. We've then reviewed those bullet points and fixed anything that was inaccurate and added anything that we might be missing. After that, we broke the problem into pieces, into categories. Then we gave it goals and a timeline. So we're getting closer. Now what we need to do is we need to start to shape this into a plan. Now, I think even the word plan is a little bit nebulous, because when people hear that, they think of all kinds of different things. Maybe you think about an ICS plan, or whatever. Maybe you think of a map. I don't know. All kinds of different images conjure into people's heads when they hear the word plan. For me, a plan is just a well understood series of steps that need to occur. And for me, the most basic form of a plan is a to-do list. And I really like simplicity. So what I would now do with this is I'm going to say, we need to turn this into a to-do list. And so the prompt would look something like, take all this information and turn it into an organized to-do list. Now, what we have in front of us is a series of tasks where if you were to complete all of these tasks, this problem would be solved. So already you can see how we had this thing swirling around in our head, this giant problem, and now we've turned it into a to-do list. But we have a few more steps. So now let's get into the next step, and that is organizing that to-do list by sequence and priority. Okay, so now what we can do is you have that to-do list in front of your eyes. So maybe you're looking at it on your phone, most likely, or possibly on a computer. And all of these to-do lists are going to be numbered. And if they're not numbered, you'd want to say, number each one of these to-do items. Because now you're going to reshuffle them, okay? You're going to say, hey, number 3 actually needs to be the first thing that gets done. Or, number 5 is not really that important at all, so either get rid of it or move it to the end, or whatever you need to do. And so the goal is we're going to sequence this. And by sequence it, we want to think about things that need to happen before other things. So this is something we all kind of intuitively understand. If you're painting a room in your house, you can't do the second coat till you've done the first coat. You can't do the first coat till you've done the prep work. You can't do the prep work till you've, bought the supplies, and so on and so forth. And so that's just a basic understanding of, in project management world, what are known as dependencies. Like, this thing is dependent on this other thing. And we could go, far down the rabbit hole on that. There's all kinds of different dependencies. There's start to start and start to finish, which basically what that means is, like, you can't start this until you've started that, or you can't start this until you've finished that. But we don't really need to get that complex. What we really need to understand when we look at this to-do list is, are there any of these activities that can't be done until another activity has been done or finished or started or whatever? And with that information, we're going to reorganize this to-do list so that it's in the correct order that things need to be done in. Now, guys, once we've done this, think about what we now have. We now have a list, a specific to-do list that is in the correct order and that's been prioritized, like the important stuff first, the things that are dependent on each other, organized correctly. That is a plan. Okay, don't let anybody convince you that a plan has to be this great big elaborate thing. A well understood list of events and tasks that need to occur is a plan. Okay, now this brings us to our final step in the process, and that is execute and iterate. Now, I put those two together because sometimes you think to yourself, oh, great, I have a plan, it's in order, everything's been sequenced. There should be no disruptions. There should be no changes. Now we can just go forth and do great things. And man, I think most people listening to this know that that's just not how life works. You'll start executing this, and as you move through the plan, things are always going to change. Things always change. I think it's this fallacy that we're going to have all the information at the beginning of a project or a problem that we need to solve it. And it's been my experience that that's just usually never in fact, that's never the case. You never know everything you need to know at the beginning. You learn it along the way. And I think that can be really intimidating for a lot of people, but you just have to remember that you can start executing with, limited information as long as you remain flexible and you're prepared to iterate. So by iterating, I mean, you get halfway through the plan and you realize that several of these steps are irrelevant. Okay, great. Maybe you take them out. Maybe you replace them with other things. New information will change the plan, and that's okay. In fact, that's the sign that you're executing this plan intelligently. Okay, let's do a quick recap here so that we can capture our progress. Okay, so this process starts because you have a problem in your head and you're feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling intimidated by it, you don't know what to do with this, and you need some help. Okay, so you open your phone, you pull up your preferred AI model, whether that's Claude or ChatGPT or Grok or whatever, and you hit the dictation button. And step one, you get it out of your head. Okay, this is the brain dump. You tell this AI model everything you know about the problem. Everything you can think of, opinions, facts, problems, what you've tried, what's failed, everything out of your head. Get it all out of your head. Whether that takes 2 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever, get it out of your head. Next, you're going to organize and review. So you ask the AI model to organize all of your thoughts into bullet points. You're going to read it thoroughly, and you're going to correct any inaccuracies, and you're going to add anything that's missing. So you might say, hey, this bullet point, instead of saying this, it should say this, and actually add this, this, and this. So as you're reading it through, you hit that microphone button again, add whatever's missing, make sure that that brain dump is accurate and complete. The next step in the process is you're going to have that AI model break the problem into manageable categories of work. So something as simple as, okay, take these bullet points and break them into categories of work. Okay. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to define your goals and your timeline. So when do you need this problem to be solved by, and what exactly does solved look like? In project management world, we might call that the definition of done. What if we had to define what done looks like? Let's do that now. All right. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to have the model turn all this information into a to-do list. And this just allows us to look at it again and say, okay, after we have tweaked this thing, we've given it all of our information, we have organized it by category of work, we've input goals and timelines. Now let's see right out in front of our eyes, all the different things that need to get done. And actually, there's one more thing I wanted to say, because I think the tendency here is to skip the step 3 where you break it into categories of work. Here's why I think that's really valuable. Because when you get to this 6th step in this process, when you're organizing this by sequence and priority, what I have found is that if you break this into categories of work, what you do is you help the AI model better understand the problem itself. And so keep this in mind. The way that these predictive text models work, and that's what AI is, it's a predictive text model. So it's thinking, what is the next correct word in the sentence or in the sequence of words? And so in that sense, sometimes it's limited by the way that these predictive text models work. And so forcing it to zoom out and view a problem from a higher level can be really valuable. So forcing it to break the work into categories helps it understand the problem better itself. So that's just as much for you as it is for the AI model. All right, let's see, where were we? We had turned it into a to-do. Oh yeah, that's where we were, to-do list. Okay, so now you have your to-do list. So now you're gonna organize it by sequence and priority. So you have a numbered to-do list, step 1, this, step 2, that, step 3, this. Now you're going to go and you're going to organize this work by sequence and priority. So, hey, this thing needs to go before that, or, that thing doesn't need to happen till the end, or, now that I think about it, this thing doesn't need to happen at all. So go through, this is almost like a final check to make sure that the order of steps is in the correct, or the order of events is in the correct order. So just like my painting analogy, make sure you're not doing that second coat before you've done the first coat. And now, at the very end, what you're left with is an organized sequence of work that you can now execute and iterate. And one final thing I want to say about this, guys, is that don't be afraid to have it reorganize that work in a way that you like. So if you're looking at it and it's listing that to-do list out and it's giving, a paragraph of explanation per item or something like that, you can always go back and say, hey, make this more concise, or add more details to this, or, whatever you want. Remember that, it doesn't mind doing all the work over again. Like for a human, if someone said, hey, take that giant to-do list and then redo it so it's slightly shorter, that would be like, an unbelievable amount of work for a small benefit. But for the AI model, it doesn't mind doing that. So if you prefer that information displayed differently, don't be afraid to just say, hey, organize it this way. And guys, that's it. That's the whole strategy. So I really hope this helps. I've actually found this to be really useful, and I probably do this, I don't know, maybe once a week to solve Maybe it's a problem for work, or maybe it's just a problem I've got at home, or whatever. Anything that you feel like you could use a little bit of help from artificial intelligence, this is a strategy that I just really like. So good luck. Hope this works out. And as always, I'd really love to hear from you guys about how you're using AI and what some of the strategies that you've come up with are. So please, if you have any, send us an email at projectcommandpodcast@gmail.com. That's projectcommandpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of Project Command. And remember, if this episode was helpful, it really helps us if you like, follow, and share it with a friend. Every share helps more fire service professionals learn the skills and mindset to deliver stronger, smarter projects. Until next time, I'm Captain Peter Younes, and this has been Project Command.